you have to live life and respect life every day. You have to embrace the time that you have right now and make that positive footprint. You only have 3 choices. You do nothing, you make a positive footprint, or a negative footprint. And it's about making those positive footprints every day. And that's what makes the world a better place.
Hello and welcome to the Sweet Spot. We are once again here in the Sweet Spot and we are feeling protected.
Excited! We're here with DJ Saunders! I'm sorry. Chief Saunders. But the Chief was a DJ. Did you know that? If you were listening last week, you do know that the Chief was a DJ, and but more importantly, he's here back with us again.
Welcome back, Chief Saunders.
Thank
Welcome
you.
back. We are, for those of you who missed the last episode, please go online and check out the Sweet Spot, because if you missed last week's episode, you really missed a treat. So go online and check out Chief Saunders. But we are excited.
We are tremendously excited, and thank you so much for coming back and sharing with us again today. And we really got a chance to hear a little bit of your story and why you became an officer, a little bit of your background growing up, and now we want to maybe just kind of proceed a little bit along and kind of talk about your life as an officer, or more specifically as the chief now.
Absolutely.
So would you maybe sort of bring us in by really just kind of recapturing this idea of policing and the fact that it's a above the shoulders game, and that it really is that decision making and that discipline, and maybe just kind of speak to that, and then we'll move from there.
Okay. I'm just going to change the coffee cup so it looks like another day.
That's awesome.
So what we have found with policing, the way we used to do policing was called traditional policing.
Right.
So what would happen is the police get called, we respond, we deal with the situation. It may lead to an apprehension or a caution, and then we move on. But what we were finding was that behavior was circular. So these people get apprehended, and we do it again and again and again.
Right.
And now we've switched to more proactive policing. And so with it, it's more holistic. And the policing in today's environment is more of a root cause type of policing. So it's putting the right resource in the right place at the right time. So instead of going, that person stole that loaf of bread, therefore they must go to court.
Right.
Why did that person steal a loaf of bread? Was it because they've got a drug dependency? Was it because they haven't properly assimilated? They don't have a job? And then what we do is we put them through what we call situational tables. And so the primary issue, whether it's a drug dependency or doesn't understand the laws or doesn't have a job, the primary agency now takes the lead. So it's not us anymore. We don't take the leadership role in this anymore, or the ownership role. We take the leadership role.
That's
so we
awesome.
work with agencies to help resolve those situations. And what we're finding is 85% of these people that we're dealing with are out of the legal system. And so the success rate is very, very high with this when we have multi-agencies working with us. And so we're looking at that and expanding our youth diversion program now, because as kids we did some stupid things.
Yes.
I did stupid things too. But that doesn't mean that you should have a criminal record.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
looking at some of these minor threshold criminal offenses, if you get caught, instead of going right to court, we take it out of the courtroom. And we help teach and guide these young men and women so that they still have hope.
We so need that.
And so that's new policing. And so our police officers are geared towards thinking that way now. And it's not about the running and the pursuit, and it's about helping. Helping. There are going to be people that are going to be going to jail. When you do serious crimes, you're going to go to jail. But the vast majority of things that we deal with aren't that. And so anything that we can do to make our community stronger, not just through the enforcement piece, but through the learning piece and the teaching and nurturing piece, are the ways of policing in the future.
That's awesome. And speaking of that, we saw a great example of that last week.
Yes.
With the police officer who, the kid was in whatever store and stole a shirt and tie, and instead of the police officer arresting this young man, he buys the
went
suit
through
and
that
tie
talking
and
process.
absolutely goes through that talking process, and he helps this kid because that kid actually took those items because he was going to an interview and he did not have anything to wear. When I heard that story, I was blown away.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if you listen to the officer, he said something which was very accurate, but most people didn't get. He said, this is stuff that police officers do on a daily basis.
Beautiful.
We do these things, but that's the type of officer that we're looking for. That's the type of officer that we're trying to hire. People that can look at the situation and look at the larger impact of what the situation can have and can cause. And so, yeah, he was fantastic what he did.
Yeah, that was beautiful. When I saw that story, I was like, oh my God, this is what it's about.
Yeah.
This is what policing is about.
So we are cheerleaders here, and big advocates. But that isn't everyone's experience, right? So we talk about so the police officers and how they do these things every day, and that's what it's all about. But we also have groups who don't feel comfortable around the police, who feel that they've been unfairly treated by police. I'm just going to leave. I'm not going to ask a question on that specifically. I'm just going to leave that open and see if you can maybe speak to that in some way.
Sure, I can easily identify that. I would say that the biggest divide that we have when it comes to community and police would be our young black men. Our young black men feel as though there is a lot more resentment towards the relationship piece and the relationship building with us. They feel being over-policed, and as a result of that, it has caused us to take a step back to see what can we do to find that happy medium. Because the bigger problem, the bigger issue is that my men and women are going into areas where the most crime is happening. So we look at on a daily basis, where are the shootings happening? What are the patterns with shootings, especially when it correlates with street gangs? And then we're putting our officers in those areas. Now, there are two things that we have to watch when we go into those areas. Number one, you don't want to over-police. That means you saturate the area and you're bugging everybody.
Right.
But the community wants us there because they want their babies to be safe. They don't want to get caught in crossfire or to be involved in situations where they're hanging out with street gangs. So we have to work together collectively a lot better as police officers and as community agencies to help reduce the crime. So a couple of things we're working on. Number one, we're training our officers to have a better understanding of what their role is in the environment.
Right.
When you go into the community, you become a part of the community, and you're either going to develop strong relationships or negative relationships. So I tell them, for every action, every police action, there is a social cost. And I need you to minimize the social cost. And if you're doing it right, I want you to create a social investment.
Right.
So these are things, these are narratives and dialogues that we're not used to measuring, but we're now moving into that with the modernization piece, which I implemented in January. So we're looking at social investment as well. And so part of that is learning to know your community better, know people by names, know who needs help, having that right type of help, but also having an understanding that there are people that are members of street gangs that will carry guns, that will shoot other people. And I want you to focus on those people from an investigative perspective, but to the rest of the community, have an understanding that those few people do not represent the entire community. And I think when we understand that we're treating everybody with dignity and respect and knowing how to talk to and who to talk to, I think we're going to get it right.
Now that is extremely eloquent, and not just eloquent. It is process oriented. It is attainable. Question: how far along are we in this process, and how are we able to actually implement this process and be successful at it?
Yeah, I think we are. We're a long way from success. And with policing, if you don't have the ability to continuously adapt and improve and modify, because society's pressures change on a regular basis, and they change quicker than ever before now because of technology, because of globalization. And so as an organization, we have to be able to move with society's speed if we're going to be successful. And so part of that is always being open always remaining open to the ideas and the viewpoints, always listening to your community. And when I say listen to the community, you've got to listen to the ones that don't agree with you, who resent you, as well as those that love you, and the moderates. You have to listen to everybody if you're going to get it right. And somewhere in that resentment piece, you're going to pick something up that can help you improve on that relationship piece as well, too.
Wow, I love that. I love that. We were actually having a conversation earlier, and when we were talking about criticism and that thing, there was something I learned when I get criticism. Right,
you get criticism?
Well, when in sport, right, there's always a little something, right, and I don't get a lot, but what I learned though is to always listen, because within criticism, there's always I need to measure it to make sure there's not some truth here. Right? Because when we hear criticism, the immediate reaction is to rebel against it, right? To put up that guard. And I've learned that there's good information in criticism. And if we can find the good information first before we throw everything out, right? And so, Chief, man, I love your line of thinking. I love you got a beautiful mind, man. You have a beautiful mind. Yes.
I can tell you a lot of that comes from my wife and how we raise our kids, because early on, I'll make a long story short, one of the kids was continuously talking, and I was like, oh, please, just be gone. But my wife was like, no, keep going. And so it was over an insignificant issue, but it went on. And as my son walked away, my wife said to me, she said, if you don't listen to our kids during the insignificant moments, what makes you think they're going to talk to you during the significant moments?
That's right. Yeah, that's powerful.
So,
that's a smart wife.
So I listen, because if it keeps the door open for those moments when you need that conversation, so you got to be there for everything, not just when you want to select it.
That's right. That's right. Now, if I can ask, speaking of your wife and your children, I know you have met your wife, beautiful wife. You have 4 children. But my question is, when we were just speaking on police officers and the issue that we have with our young black men,
yes,
I know that you have 3 sons. Now, is there any advice that you give to your sons? I know that we've had crazy situations down in the States where, things have gone awry with our police officers and our young black men. Is there any advice that you give to your sons as young black men growing up in this day and age? You're the police officer. You are the chief of police. Is there any advice as a father and as chief of police that you have for your sons?
Well, the advice that I give all the time is if they're not feeling comfortable in the environment, is to walk away. But the second piece is to be respectful. The men and women in the Toronto Police Service, I love what they do each and every day. I have no fear or no harm or concern with how my men and women would treat my 2 black babies. And so I'm confident that they'll be treated with the dignity and respect. But it starts off with my young men being respectful.
Absolutely.
And that's a starting point. And so when I ask that of them, I have no harm or no concern about them being harmed in any way, shape, or form.
Okay. Beautiful.
That's amazing. Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. I am so pleasantly enthralled by this cerebral approach that you take to policing, and so if you've already sort of done it a little bit, if you might be able to speak directly. You talked a little bit about the information you give to your boys, right? And that is to be respectful. And we've said that many times. People ask, what was it like? And I have been stopped in a neighborhood, because I was driving a nice car in Florida and in Toronto. But I find that when I simply be respectful, understand they have a job to do, right? Is this fair? I don't care, right? They got a job to do, and this is my turn on deck. And I find that when I'm respectful, generally everything is great, and it things move along, right? So my if you wouldn't mind, right? Can you speak to the young person Black or any other nationality who has been wrongfully had a challenging interaction with police. Would you just maybe speak directly to that person?
Yeah, I'll just go back a little bit. I'm going to premise it with a little bit of a story, and then I can get into it a little bit. Right. So, racism exists from within society, whether we like it or not. It's here in Canada. It's in the States. It seems to be a bit more overt in the States, but it does exist here. And I can tell you, back in the day, when I was a police officer and I was driving my car with my baseball cap on backwards, there was one year when I got stopped over 10 times. I got stopped over 10 times. And I fast forward. What had happened was the men and women on the streets understood that there was street gangs in the city, but they didn't have the comprehensive training to understand what to look for.
That's right.
So for some reason they thought if they'd stop a car and flip it over, you'd find a gun. But through comprehensive training, things slowed down. And I didn't get stopped as much. So I'm a very firm believer that there is responsibility for me as chief to have that comprehensive training so that people do not rely on the negative stereotypes of people. Right. And so that comes through training, that comes through exposure and understanding that we're all human. Now, I can tell you even up to this day, there have been certain stores that I've walked in as chief on my days off where I've been followed around by security. Yes. And I know the security because it got to the point I get fed up. I just pull them over and I go, look, guy, go find the right person. It's not me. And they've been embarrassed and they've gone away. And I'll be with my wife and I'll go over there and she'll look and I'll go, let's turn this corner and watch what happens. And so you do this thing where it's this cat and mouse game. And so she gets to see, listen, you do live a different experience if you're black. That's just the reality. So I understand that. But I also am a firm believer that through comprehensive training, we can eliminate that implicit bias that people have. People have implicit bias. You can't eliminate it. But you can train to not have that implicit bias cause you to behave a certain way. And so we are continuously trying to do that. But to the young men and anyone that feels that they're being challenged in an inappropriate way by law enforcement, there is a time and a place for that argument, and that's in the courtroom. That is in the courtroom. Yes. All I can do is try to make my officers more accountable, which is why every single police car that I have has a camera in it. Every single police car that we have has a camera. If you've got a problem with that encounter that you have, freedom of information, it costs $5, and you get that information so that you can have your day and you can challenge that in the courtroom. I'm moving towards getting body-worn cameras on all of my officers. So I'm trying to do my best through training and through equipment so that we can be as transparent as we possibly can to make sure that we are treating everybody with that dignity and respect, but also using it as a tool, too. Because if some people are implicit and their behavior is in accordance to their implicit bias, we need to see that identified and work with people so that we can get them out of that, so that we can continue to develop those stronger relationships. But the time to have the fight is not in the street with a police officer. It's not. It's in the courtroom.
So question, how does a 17-year-old have a voice? How does a 23-year-old who has got a part-time job and trying, because they're not going to be able to take a police officer to court, right? And the level of representation that a police officer has as opposed to what they would have taking a case to court. Like I've got a complaint. Something happened to me. I feel I was disrespected. How do they handle that?
Well, there's a complaint system. It's an independent complaint system. It's called the OIPRD. And that is, they're not related to the Toronto Police, but they are responsible for conducting all investigations about us. And so that's where you go. You go there and you say, I did not like the way that I was being treated. And believe it or not, it's more important, like I encourage it, because most good police officers do not want bad police officers because that one police officer can have such a negative impact across the whole organization. So if anyone sees that we're not behaving properly, you report it. And then that way, we're allowed to have that investigation. And like I said, if it was a traffic stop or whatever, it can be reviewed by them, or IPRD will keep the investigation themselves, or they'll force us to do the investigation. But we always report our findings back to them, and then they determine what the outcomes are going to be. But it's a starting process. It's a starting process, and a lot of people will go, you know what, that encounter sucked, but I'm not going to do anything about it. And I say, no, because if that officer is behaving inappropriately, what you've done is you've just emboldened him or her to do that again. And if that officer has done this continuously and you've put that complaint in, well, then it gives us an opportunity to say, well, you know what, this officer's done this more than once and he or she needs to be disciplined in accordance with the Police Services Act.
Okay, everybody's going to take 3 deep breaths together. Ready? In, out. In, out. In, out. This is the sweet spot, and we want to make sure that we ask you some real questions. But the reality is the greatest amount of work that police officers do is great work. I want to give you a chance now to just brag a little bit, to kind of talk about a little bit of policing and how it's progressed, and you've given a little bit of a detail of the new policing, and maybe if you want to highlight someone specifically, whatever you like to do. We got just like give you a chance to just chat to the public a little bit, and just talk a little bit about policing, what it means to you, and if you have a chance to just celebrate police officers a little bit now.
Well, each and every day I celebrate the great work that the men and women of my police service and, police agencies right across the province are doing. I can tell you one of the more challenging things that we are having issues with, but we're moving faster at improving, is dealing with people with mental health issues. That is such a growing concern, and it is on the rise. And each and every year, those numbers are going up.
Right. Yep.
And we're law enforcement, but we are also now healthcare providers, because after 6 o'clock in the evening, we're the de facto healthcare providers. But when we look at our numbers, like last year, we did over 25,000 calls dealing with people with mental health issues. And when we look at our use of force, over those 25,000 encounters, our use of force numbers was 0.67%. Really, really low. So that's telling me that our officers, the vast majority of times, are de-escalating, having that conversation, and trying to keep it within the framework which it needs to be kept in to try to get help. Because nobody chooses to have mental health issues. You don't choose that. Once it happens, it's devastating. But sometimes behavior can appear to be, can be violent. And so we have to figure out, once again, root cause. This person is not behaving this way because he or she is violent. It's because they're living with mental health issues. And so our officers have to keep changing their hats from police to doctor, back and forth, and then acting in accordance so that they can have the best results out there. And I can tell you, my officers in Toronto are the best trained in the country when it comes to dealing with people with mental health.
Wow. So you said 0.67, that's like 2 times out of every 300 occurrences physical force is used in dealing with someone with mental health.
That's about right.
Wow,
awesome.
2 in 300.
That's impressive.
Yeah, and those numbers, they've been shrinking. The numbers for our encounters are going up, but our use of force has gone down because we are talking about de-escalation and looking at it from a much different perspective. As a first option is de-escalation.
Can you tell me something else you're proud of?
Oh, I could go on forever. Each and every day, as chief, one of the things that I do is I see the dailies. So I see the calls that go on across the city. And every day, the men and women are doing fantastic work. They're doing amazing jobs out there, and they're helping people, and they're doing it just in such a selfless way. And it's never in a newspaper. It's never in a newspaper. And so I think that's where there's that frustration piece.
Exactly.
Because the great work always gets, put away.
Cannibalized.
That's right.
When the
and
one
everything negative is
and so everyone thinks that's how we do it all of the time. And so it's very frustrating right now, but we have to learn, I think, as law enforcement, we have to take it to another level, and we have to start marketing our product better. And so I'm hoping in the future that there'll be opportunities that I can create. We can showcase all of this hidden great work that is done by the officers each and every day.
That's awesome. So, Chief, I'd like to just throw some rapid fire questions at you.
Rapid fire.
Just something fun, just, and you just give me one response.
Okay, I'll try to be fun.
So, favorite color?
Blue.
Okay. Yeah. Favorite song?
Lots of them. Yeah, I couldn't answer that one today. Lots of them.
As a DJ, you don't have a favorite song, Chief?
It depends on the mood.
It depends on the mood.
Yeah.
Okay.
Favorite dance song to get them up, get people on the floor. How about favorite love song?
I don't want to ruin songs between my wife and I, right?
Yes.
There are songs. I don't want to share them.
Yes,
Okay.
Blanks.
Yes.
That's okay. Let's see. Do you have one, honey? Favorite?
What's your favorite leisure activity?
Oh, TV.
TV.
Yeah.
Very good.
Terrible for reality TV. It's horrible.
Reality TV.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, no,
So favorite reality show?
Oh, boy.
Yes.
I'll come across as diminished.
Yes. No.
Really?
Okay, so hold
really
that.
want
So,
me-
no. Hold that one tight. We're okay. Yes.
I love it. What advice would
Even the chief has to have secrets. right? Yes.
Okay. What advice would you give to your younger self?
To my younger self, every day is an investment. Don't do things because there's something at the end. Just learn something new every day, and at one point in time, everything will catch up, and there'll be a moment where everything you've learned has put you in the right spot for amazing things to happen.
Thanks, Chief. I can use that today. All right. That's beautiful.
Great. That's great. So, we always like to ask our guests if there is a favorite scripture, something that, you have a tough job, and I'm sure you have a lot of tough days. Is there a favorite scripture that you go back to time and time again that gets you through those tough times?
I'm big on the parable, so I spoke to you about Matthew, the second one that I like the most, just because it's my dad telling me this stuff, right? It's Luke. It's remember the story about the farmer that was doing really well, and he was talking about how the next year's going to be great. I'm going to build that second silo so we can reap twice as much, and it's like, well, you fool, you took all this time to invest in this tonight I'm taking your soul. So you have to live life and respect life every day, and you don't know what's going to happen around the corner. And really, working in Homicide Squad, I learned that all of these victims, they didn't choose these days. And so while you're sitting there figuring out what I'm going to do tomorrow, you're not going to have it tomorrow. So you have to embrace the time that you have right now and make that positive footprint. Because you only have three choices. You do nothing, you make a positive footprint, or a negative footprint. And it's about making those positive footprints every day. And that's what makes the world a better place.
That was beautiful.
Yes.
Nothing more.
Yes. Well, would it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? So keep investing into life. I think you've taught us today. Making good decision, being rational, taking that that approach that we want to distill challenges, right?
Yes.
Rather than engage physically. This has been a real learning process for us.
It's been a treat.
But more than that, it's been enriching, right? It is wonderful.
Absolutely.
It is great to see when the number one guy in your city, right, is all that in a bag of chips. That there's a process here that has taken place, that you've shown leadership in grade school. You showed leadership in high school. You had independent friends suggest that you should do this because of your discipline, because of your good decision-making process. This isn't just something that happened one day. This is something that has been forming your entire life, from great parents who really gave a platform for success with 2 Olympians in your family, and 3 other siblings that are successful and doing well. We salute you. We salute your family. We thank you for coming on. You are a real treat, Chief, and we're so glad to call you our boss. So thank you for
and
doing it
not just
well.
our boss, but our friend.
Yes,
But
yes.
our friend.
So yeah, most importantly, because you're our friend.
Absolutely.
And so thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for what you do daily. And I know we kind of referred to it as a challenging job. Let's change the narrative. You have a great job. And we have a great person that's fulfilling that job for us on a daily basis. Protect and serve is the mantra that you serve and or that you lead. And we're infinitely grateful for you being our chief. Chief Saunders, thank you for helping us to get in the sweet spot.
Thank you. I love you guys.
Thank you so much. You are awesome.
Love you back,
Thank you to our listeners for tuning in, and we hope you have enjoyed this segment. Like I said, if you missed last week, please go online and check out Chief Saunders, Chief Mark Saunders. He is definitely a treat and a joy and a great friend. So thank you. Until next time, stay in your sweet spot.
Sun will shine.